Once upon a time, there was a young teenage girl called Ella Johnson. Ella was filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness as her family returned to Nigeria after several years in Canada. Her parents, both successful professionals, had decided that reconnecting with their cultural roots was important, especially for their children. Ella's father, a respected business mogul, wanted his family to experience life in their homeland, and her mother believed that the cultural values and family bond would provide Ella and her siblings with a deeper sense of identity. The Johnsons had always been a close knit, vibrant family. Ella's older brother and sister, who were now in university, had already spent a significant part of their childhood in Nigeria. They understood the nuances of Nigerian life, but Ella, being the youngest and still in her teens, felt the transition mostly. She missed the open parks in Canada, the easy friendships, and the familiar environment. Abuja's social dynamics felt weird and strange to her, and this feeling of displacement only worsened as she enrolled at St. Catherine's Academy, a prestigious all girls boarding school her parents believed would offer the best education and refinement for her. Little did the Johnsons know that their move back to Nigeria, intended to connect Ella with her roots, would instead expose her to a new world of rivalry and resentment. Ella's first day at St. Catherine's Academy should have been a day of new beginning. Instead, it quickly became the start of a nightmare she could never have anticipated. Ella, a beautiful girl with keen intelligence and a heart full of dreams, had been raised in a loving family where academic excellence was encouraged and rewarded. Her father's reputation also preceded her at the school. The other girls, particularly those in their senior year, didn't welcome her as a fellow student. They saw her as competition. As the daughter of one of Nigeria's wealthiest businessmen, Ella was accustomed to being noticed, though she had never sought attention to herself. But in this elite school, where many students were also from affluent backgrounds, her academic achievements and her father's higher status created an unspoken resentment towards her. Her beauty, grace, and intelligence only intensified the jealousy of her peers, especially those who were older and had long held power over the social order at St. Catherine. The hostility started as a subtle exclusion, but over time it became something darker. As weeks turned into months, Ella tried her best to fit in but kept feeling out of place. Her smooth complexion, soft spoken Canadian accent, and reserved demeanor marked her as different. The other girls, many of whom came from affluent and influential families, initially viewed her with polite curiosity. But as time went on, curiosity turned to suspicion, especially among the older students who felt their long standing social hierarchy was threatened by this new girl, Ella. Ella was naturally brilliant, and this quickly attracted attention to her. Teachers praised her work openly, impressed by her maturity and dedication, and it wasn't long before she rose to the top of the class. She received many awards as a top performing student. There were a group of girls who held power over the social order at St. Catherine Secondary School. Among them was Bola, a tall, striking girl whose father held a minor political position, and Tolu, the daughter of a high ranking diplomat. Together, these girls were notorious for their cruel pranks and bullying tactics. While the teachers praised Ella for her brilliance, her effortless success was a threat to these senior girls, Bola, Tolu, and the other. Bola, in particular, felt threatened by Ella's rise. Used to being seen as the smartest and most popular girl, Bola prided herself on her high grades and influential family. Ella's quiet achievement seemed to overshadow everything Bola had worked to build over the years at the academy. What Bola found even more infuriating was the admiration their teachers showed Ella, often citing her work as the standard to follow. Where others saw Ella's success as well earned, Bola saw only a threat. Bola and her friends couldn't stand that Ella's father overshadowed theirs in wealth and prominence. They despised that a newcomer would outshine them and disrupt their carefully maintained dominance in school. Ella sensed the hostility, but she was hopeful. She reasoned that if she kept to herself and stayed focused on her studies, the ill treatment would eventually stop. However, her hopes were short lived. The older girls found ways to make her life miserable. Regardless of all the attention Ella gathered, she kept her head down, humble, excelled academically, but focused. She had always been the studious type. You know, the girls who found more comfort reading than partying. Yes, that is Ella. Unfortunately, Bola the bully and her friends were cooking up plans for her. Ella became a target in St. Catherine's Academy. Ella was seated in class one day, answering questions with ease as the teacher praised her. She could feel the eyes of Bola and her friends on her, but she tried to ignore them. After class, as she made her way to her locker, she found a crumpled note inside her locker, written in a sharp, angry scroll. Stay in your lane, princess. That day, she realized her effort to blend in had already failed. The next day, it was a rainy afternoon, and the students had gathered in the hall for an assembly. Ella took her seat near the front as directed, unaware that Bola and her friend had gathered behind her. As the headmistress began her speech, Ella felt a sharp tug on her hair. She muttered a sound, only to turn and see Bola behind her. Throughout that assembly, Bola would yank her hair or jab at her, and Ella, who didn't want to draw attention to herself, bore the pain in silence. It was her first taste of Bola's cruelty. The next day, after class, Ella returned to her dorm room to find her bed covered in powdered chalk and a note that said, Brilliant, aren't you? Clean it up. As she stood there, her heart sinking, her roommate silently slipped out, not even sparing her a sympathetic look. The isolation began to feel heavier than the chalk dust she had reluctantly swept up. Alone in a room that no longer felt like hers, she cleaned up and went down for lunch. During lunch, in the crowded dining hall, Ella sat alone as usual, carefully eating her meal. Bola and her friends sat at a nearby table, whispering and sneaking glances at her. Suddenly, Bola's friend, Chioma, accidentally spilled her drink on Ella's food tray, drenching her meal in bright red soda. With a forced laugh, Chioma muttered, Oops, clumsy me. Ella cleaned up in silence, her cheeks burning with embarrassment as the other students watched, as if that wasn't enough. That evening, Ella was in the library reviewing notes for an upcoming exam. As she left, she found that her carefully prepared flashcards and exam note had gone missing. It wasn't until the next morning that she found them, torn into pieces and scattered across the steps leading up to the classroom. The quiet malice of Bola and her friends wore her down. With only few weeks left until holiday break, Ella had nearly reached her breaking point, but she tried to stay focused on her studies. That evening, Bola and her group approached her in the hallway, blocking her path. They pushed her back and demanded to know why she thought she was better than everyone. Before she could answer, Bola pushed her, saying, You don't belong here, Miss Goody Two Shoes. During one of the visiting days, Ella pleaded with her parents to let her return to Canada or at least enroll in a different school. But they assured her that it was just a phase and that things would get better. They had no idea what Ella endured each day or how exhausting it had become to simply exist within the walls of St. Catherine's Academy. By the end of the academic year, the bullies decided they had enough. The seniors were days away from graduating, and for them, Ella's presence was a blemish they couldn't tolerate. On the day before school closed for holidays, they decided to execute their final prank. After evening classes, they waited for Ella by the lockers. When she arrived, they pretended to need help with a surprise they were planning for a mutual friend. Trusting them for once, Ella reluctantly agreed to follow along. In a dark corner, they coerced her into an empty locker, promising her it was part of the fun. Before she could protest, they pushed her inside, locked the door, and walked away, laughing. She pleaded to be released, her voice muffled by the metal enclosure, but they didn't look back. Their attention shifted immediately to packing and saying goodbye to friends, and in the rush of excitement for the holiday, Ella was forgotten in the locker. The locker was cramped, dark, and airless. Time moved slowly as Ella tried to keep herself calm, hoping someone would come for her soon. She tapped weakly on the locker, but no one heard. The voices and footsteps outside gradually faded as students and staff began to leave campus. As the hours passed, Ella grew weak, feeling a tightness in her chest from the lack of air and rising panic. Hours turned into a day, and still no one came. Inside the locker, Ella drifted in and out of consciousness, the lack of ventilation making it harder for her to breathe. Her thoughts blurred, her mind flashing to her family, to the siblings she missed, and to her parents who had reassured her that everything would be fine. Her beautiful future, which had once seemed so bright, began to fade as she fainted in the locker. As the final bell rang that day, St. Catherine's Secondary School was instantly alive with the excitement and energy of students ready for the holiday break. Laughter echoed down the hallway as girls bustled out of their classes, chatting about their holiday plans. Outside, an array of sleek cars lined the school gate. Many adorned with family drivers waiting patiently, while others were filled with parents eager to see their daughters after the long term. Friends hugged goodbye, their voices filling the air with promises to text and meet up. Their spirits high with anticipation of home cooked meals, family gatherings, and freedom. Amidst the buzz of holiday cheer, Ella's family driver, Musa, stood patiently, scanning the sea of familiar faces. He expected Ella's bright smile to appear any minute. His hands were clasped together, eyes following the flow of students. He was waiting for Ella to come out. But after several hours, he didn't see Ella. He waited and waited and waited, anxiously pacing back and forth, feeling the weight of the absence in the pit of his stomach. He asked one of the teachers, lingering at the gate, but no one seemed to know where Ella was. With rising worry, he called Ella's parents, his voice a mix of worry, as he reported the one thing he never thought he would ever say. Hello, sir. Ella did not come out, sir. Ella's parents were away on a business trip. They booked the earliest flight back to Nigeria the next day. By the next morning, they were on the school ground, filing a formal missing person report, demanding answers from St. Catherine's administration. Ella's father questioned how could his daughter be missing from school? The school administration kept giving lame excuses like teenagers often attempted sneaking out, maybe Ella snuck out, maybe she didn't want to go home. The staff quickly looked through dormitory rooms, classrooms, and common areas, finding no sign of Ella. But her locker was untouched, a place no one considered, assuring that if she were hiding, she ought to have come out by now. Hours slipped away, and Ella, trapped in silence for over 24 hours, could do nothing more to attract attention. She had drifted in and out of consciousness, weakened by exhaustion and lack of air. Her faint breathing and soft cries, if any, were swallowed by the thick metals of the locker. No one expected that a girl who was normally so present, so dependable, could be so close yet entirely unreachable. Late that evening, the campus security guard, an elderly man, Mr. Okon, whom Ella greeted every morning before classes, felt a strange pang of worry. Ella would greet him in the morning before classes and in the evening while returning to her dormitory room. So he noticed that Ella didn't greet him the previous evening before moving to the dorm room. He took his concern to the school authority and Ella's parents, telling them that there was a possibility Ella did not leave the school. With Mr. Okon's statement, a new urgent search began. Police and law enforcement officials were called in to conduct a full sweep of the whole school. Flashlights cut through the dimly lit halls as officers and volunteers checked every room, storage area, and locker. Finally, one officer had a faint sound, just a fragile, almost silent sound. Following it, he traced the noise back to a locker in the hallway. The air thick with suspense as he opened it. Inside, they found Ella, barely conscious, pale and shivering. She was rushed to the hospital. As the medics worked to stabilize her condition, her parents were heartbroken, hovering by her side as she lay in intensive care, a faint shadow of the girl who had once been so vibrant. The incident shook the foundation of St. Catherine's. The school faced legal repercussions and the names of those responsible were exposed. Ella's story was told amongst the students, and the family's battle for justice highlighted the dangers of unchecked power and privilege. As Ella slowly recovered, the once elite school was left with a tarnished reputation. Bola, Tolu, and Chioma, who were initially horrified when they heard what happened. However, they maintained their innocence, saying they had only meant to play a prank. The story spread through the school. Once the investigation pointed to Bola and her friends as the culprits behind Ella's tragic ordeal, a wave of outrage spread through the school and the community. The authorities and Ella's family demanded accountability, determined to see the girls face the consequences of their action. But in a sudden, decisive move, the parents of Bola and her friends took a swift action. To shield their daughters from impending changes, they arranged for private jets to whisk them out of the country before any legal action would be enforced. News of their sudden departure quickly spread, igniting frustration and sense of betrayal among the school community. Ella remained in coma, while her parents wished they listened to her when she requested for a change of school. The school set up a new rule, implementing strict anti-bullying measures and psychological support system for students. But for the Johnsons family, these changes came late. Ella's future had been shattered by jealousy and the senseless cruelty of her peers. Over time, Ella's story became a reminder to parents, schools, and students across the nation. Her tragic experience was a powerful catalyst for change, bringing greater awareness to the impact of bullying and the importance of empathy and vigilance. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me what you think about this bullying that goes on in schools. Why do kids bully? And how did they become that heartless? Subscribe and turn on your notification bell to be the first to know when another amazing story is made available. Like and share so others will see this and learn this lesson. To the next story.